Dear colleagues from ManuFuture, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank the responsible people at ManuFuture for inviting me, because as you heard, I represent SusChem and SPIRE, so that's not exactly ManuFuture and factories of the future. But we have very similar challenges as you have with ManuFuture. And actually, those challenges are probably more closely related than between any other two PPPs. So first of all, when the European Commission asked the industry to get its act together, we had to form European technology platforms. So you started ManuFuture and we started SusChem, the European Technology Platform for Sustainable Chemistry. And then we had the challenge to run good projects. And you started Factories of the Future as a PPP during the crisis, and we're getting ready to start SPIRE as a contractual PPP for Horizon 2020. So SPIRE is sustainable process industries through resource and energy efficiency. And the other challenge, which is not the organization of our organizational bodies, but the other challenge is that we as an industry, and I will show you the different sectors, the process industry has been losing ground for quite some years now. If you compare the development, for example, in the chemical industry in Europe with the APEC countries, China, there is a factor of 3 between what China has gained and what we have not gained in Europe. So there's very much a need for support, and this support is necessary to take the good research in Europe to the strong innovation that will allow us to regain a position. So when we look at the innovation landscape in Europe, this is quite a diverse picture. And you've heard all the interesting elements of it during the course of the morning, like Europe 2020, Horizon 2020, Europe for Growth, New Skills and Jobs, KETs, EIPs, ERC. There are many things in there, many pathways, many elements. So the question is really, how is this relevant for the process industry? And obviously that shouldn't be a black box. The process industry is basically a long value chain that has many connections also with ManuFuture. And we're worried about the resources that are coming into the processes that are being run in the process industry. And those are non-renewable resources, fossil resources like oil and gas, minerals, but also then in the future renewable resources, energy, water. And what about the outcomes, the needs? What is the optimization of making sure that the societal needs are met properly? And there are many industries that are our partners in the process industry, like construction, transport, but also the information technology. So how do we handle this as the process industry? And the challenge is, obviously, we all know that our resources are limited, so we somehow have to adapt and actually use that to our advantage. And then we will have more needs with, hopefully, wealth and growth in Europe coming again, so somehow we need to optimize this. And we're focusing here on Europe, so even if there are many international companies involved in SPIRE and in SusChem, it is clear that we want to leverage the advantages that we have in Europe, strengthen our basis in Europe. So what we did is that the different sectors in the process industry, which are shown here, banded up and said, we have common challenges and we would like to tackle them in the framework of a joint public-private partnership. So the steel industry, water, cement, ceramics, engineering, minerals, metals, and last but not least, the chemical industry banded up and formed SPIRE. So SPIRE is our way of saying we want to improve resource and energy efficiency in the process industry through proper innovation. Innovation that is being supported in a public-private partnership that we obviously call SPIRE. Now, if you look at our industry, traditionally the picture is we have raw materials and we use a lot of them. Then we have some factory that uses energy and water. We produce a material and a lot of waste. And obviously, yeah, that's right, but we need to change that perception, but we also need to change the quantitative combination of elements in that value chain. And for that, we are focusing on 4 R's in what we have as our roadmap for the public-private partnership. First of all, we want to reduce a number of things like the use of the feedstocks, reduce emissions, reduce the energy and water usage, and prevent waste. Then we need to focus on the reuse. The chemical industry, for example, has a long track record of using products that come out of the production again in other production processes, but there is a lot to be gained in working in different sectors across different industries. So we're actually looking for systems where we find business models that combine efforts from different sectors of our process industries. And then in terms of replacing the normal fossil feedstocks through, for example, renewable feedstocks, but also by replacing our processes by much more efficient processes is one of the strong items that has been detailed in the roadmap. And for that, a number of things have to be invented, innovations have to come along, and that is basically focusing on the full value chain. We have the feed component, the feedstock component, which means that, for example, the use of CO2 as a raw material is something that we will be focusing on. We need equipment and devices for monitoring, controlling, and optimizing the processes, the new processes. So there's a real need for innovation in these technologies because the new processes will not look like exactly the same as the old ones. So there is quite some challenge in that area. Then resource and energy efficiency management systems is a very common challenge that I think also would bring us together with ManuFuture companies, because how you manage and optimize the use of energy and resources is something that is very important and needs to be done systematically and efficiently. So new materials that then have positive effects on the energy efficiency in the actual application, and then obviously the improved use of waste. Now all of these research and innovation activities and goals have been written down in detail in our multi-annual roadmap. What I also want to point out is that there are many connections, not just to DG research and innovation in this. And I think, Massimo, you mentioned that in your presentation also. When we look at DG Connect, then what I said about sensors, process analyzers, simulation-based optimization of the processes, that is a very important aspect that can be clearly related to activities in the ICT area. Then environment, if you reduce the output of CO2 or even use CO2 as a raw material in processes, that is something that clearly has an impact on environmental goals. I already talked about energy efficiency, that's the obvious one, but also in the change of energy supply, for example, from renewable resources, there will be a much more fluctuating supply of energy that will then have to lead to new and optimized processes that manage this fluctuating energy supply. So there are activities going on in terms of using, for example, chemical processes as buffers for energy so that the energy can be used at later moments in time when needed. And we hope that DG Enterprise, as we already heard this morning, recognizes that competitiveness is not something that we just have to write down and then it happens. We're really under pressure here, and if we use the core elements of European industry, then there is a good chance that we can actually fight back and come back in an environment where currently we're not in such a favorable position. So the new picture could then be like shown here at the bottom. Instead of just using raw materials as they come in, we would use CO2, we would use renewable resources, we would use the waste in addition to the normal resources. We make sure that we run well-optimized, automated, highly smart processes, which then need less energy and water. And we make sure that we produce products that then in themselves have a large benefit in terms of the energy efficiency of the industry, and make sure we recycle as much as we can. So, is that possible or impossible? It sounds like a mouthful, it sounds like a lot of promises, but the industry is clearly committed to what we called our ambitions as they have been shown in the roadmap for SPIRE. A reduction in fossil energy intensity of up to 30%. So we think that that is possible because we have seen examples that have yielded such improvements. And we would like to try to reduce the non-renewable primary raw material intensity by up to 20%. And obviously a significant contribution to efficiency improvements in the CO2 equivalent footprint would be really good. And we're confident that with the focus on renewables and energy efficiency that can be done. Also, when you look at key performance indicators, that is again something that resembles very much what we have heard about ManuFuture, and I'll be short on this one. But we can measure the results. There's no problem in doing that. The reuse of CO2 emissions can be measured easily. When we use advanced energy management systems, that can be done too. Recycling processes can be established and counted. We would like to have value from process industries across all the sectors leveraged, and we will make sure that we have a number of projects that can actually do that. When you look at some of the proposals that have been already discussed but not finalized for SPIRE, I just want to give you one example. One idea was to have a biotechnological synthesis of acetone from coupling gas via fermentation using gas from a steel mill, including a piloting and demonstration facility. Wouldn't that be a nice project to do in Horizon 2020 and in SPIRE? It would include the biotechnological aspect, it would include the intersectorial activity in using the gas from the steel industry, and then using it for something relevant in the chemical industry. Now, why do we think we can be successful in this? First of all, we think we have chosen a very systematic approach that includes the full value chain of our industries. And as you can see a little later, that is actually very obvious in the distribution of who is a member of SPIRE. We are clearly including all elements of the innovation and research value chain. This is not just industry focusing on technology readiness level 7. We need some really bright ideas and good ideas coming out of academia that then can be transformed into something practical. So this is something we very, very much promise to include that whole value chain and not just focus on some demonstration at the very end. And obviously, in terms of the big and small enterprises, I will show you one example where you can see that even when big companies say we need to run a project on something, it is like a magnet for SMEs and gives good opportunities for SMEs to participate. I think only this will give us a chance to be competitive against other continents. This is not about one country fighting China. This is about Europe banding up and aligning so that we have a fighting chance against other continents. So this is serious stuff. One other reason why we think we can do this is because we've done something similar in one example. Now, this is just a 30 million euro project, and it's not a full program, which is probably more counted in billions. But I think it's actually a very good example. It was run in FP7, and we were sponsored and supported by DG R&I. And we ran a project called the F3 Factory. And the F3 Factory project was focusing on modular, efficient, and flexible production paradigms. And I will give you some examples here how this project actually did some of the things that we're now all promising for our PPPs. The first thing is we needed a facility for demonstration. And beyond being a European-funded public funding project, this actually turned out to be a public-private partnership. And I say that because the project itself was funded by the European Commission, but the infrastructure was then funded by the state of North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany. So we established a not-for-profit research facility. It's a joint venture between a Bayer company and the Technical University of Dortmund. And this is a neutral ground where all the partners in F3 demonstrated their successful examples. This one is dedicated to these new emerging technology platforms and emerging production technologies. So it's a wonderful vehicle, and we obviously aligned some of the goals of different funding institutions and the industry behind this. The project itself had 26 partners, and it was initiated by some really big companies many years ago: Arkema, AstraZeneca, Evonik, Rhodia, now Solvay, BASF, Procter & Gamble, and Bayer. And we all identified this topic of flexible and modular production as something very relevant. So despite all concerns about intellectual property protection, these companies banded up and formed this project. And each company has demonstrated successfully some really interesting topics around the overall area of flexible production. And I'm going to give you two examples so that you believe me what I'm saying. Rhodia, Solvay, and BASF worked on a multi-product pilot plant for an acrylic acid-based polymer. And BASF and Bayer, not known to be no competitors to each other, worked together on a solvent-free process for multi-product batch polymerization. So it was a wonderful example of working together. And you can see that many of the partners in that project were actually SMEs and universities. So the process of including the whole innovation pipeline, but also the promise of including SMEs in this example is clearly exemplified. And what we really want to do is run many more such projects in SPIRE. Overall, there were some really interesting results delivered, which are measurable. And as Herbert von Bose said this morning, we need to talk about stuff we deliver at the end so that it becomes credible. And what you can see here is that there are examples in some of the demonstrations that we ran where the time to market for a relevant product was cut by 50%. There are examples where the capital invest volume was cut by 40% and the operational cost by 20%. Now, these are specific examples for some of the demonstrations in this project, but this indicates that we can do similar things in new projects in SPIRE. So, overall, I think SPIRE has some interesting parameters. We have way more than 80 members by now, approaching 100. Including 25 RTOs. The companies are willing to invest 1.5 billion over 7 years. We currently cover 15 countries. The industry represents almost 7 million employees, and overall we're talking about almost 500,000 enterprises all over Europe. Turnover is 1.6 trillion euros, so 8 sectors banded up to form this PPP. And that's about 20% of the EU economy that has been mentioned a couple of times already. So we think we can generate growth and reduce the usage of resources. And as you can see here, we have a wide variety and diversity of partners. So in summary, I hope I could exemplify that SPIRE is a joint initiative from a substantial part of the European industry, namely the process industry, with a clear strategic roadmap. We have a broad commitment actually along all elements from academia, SMEs, RTOs, and the industry. I think it will improve the competitiveness clearly because these elements are focusing on an industry that has been very strong but was lagging behind the development in other regions of the world. And I also can say that I know that we're well prepared and we're ready to go and very much looking forward to making SPIRE happen and lead it to a good success. With that, I would like to finish and thank the organizers again for inviting me, talking about SPIRE and SusChem. And I think we will jointly work on, maybe fight for, our common interest in the future to make sure that the PPPs will become a big success in Horizon 2020. Thank you.